You're listening to Podcast, the personal productivity podcast from CRM Audio, brought to you by Inogic, who introduces their new card-based Kanban view for Dynamics 365 and Power Apps, with card-based visualization of the records for views, configurable lane categories, and drag-and-drop cards across lanes to update the records. And Matthew, how are you doing today?
Joel, I am excellent. Welcome to 2020. A little bit late in.
A little bit, yeah. But we've been so productive, we haven't had time for a podcast.
Exactly. It's prioritization, and I think we both had that silent agreement of, we got some things we're focusing on right now.
Well, actually, last week on my analytics, I hit for the first time 42% of time for focus.
Oh, congrats on that.
I feel like I've graduated to a new level.
Yeah, I can say I have that much focus time scheduled. I am not hitting it, but I am getting more and more people to respect that time that I've got out there. So yeah, it's a process. We'll say that.
Right. So I've been putting a focus for 2020 on learning. Trying to get some certifications as well as learn some other things. I find that, sometimes you just get a little stale and you need to update your skill set, especially working with technology. Have you been doing anything with learning in 2020?
Yeah, absolutely. So the most recent certification I earned is the Azure A.I. Engineer Associate certification. So
okay.
That's the AI 100. It was the exam, the core exam behind that one.
So is this like super deep data science stuff, or what is it?
So it is a collection of cognitive services, including language understanding and prediction, translation, getting into machine learning pipelines, and how do you actually build and structure those services together to be able to meet the need for some sort of end user use case.
Cool. So what made you decide on that one versus all the other many things you could study?
Yeah, so I had a stretch goal for myself around kind of getting outside of the business applications kind of silo within our product cloud, the different solution areas. I wanted to do something in Azure, and I looked toward what are those things that I talk about, the concepts of in the biz app platform a lot, but I'd like to be able to go deeper and chat with folks about what's going on behind the scenes, talk intelligently around what some of those capabilities are. And what really comes up a ton is these things around cognitive services and kind of improving those experiences using prediction automation around that. So it seemed like a really good fit. And then with the advent of the AI builder capabilities in Power Platform and some of what we have inside of customer insights and being able to make predictions about this kind of superset of information about customers, it just seemed like a really appropriate place to put some of that learning effort into.
Definitely a hot area there. So how much time did you allocate to preparing for it?
Yeah, so I have had this on my radar for about the last 4.5, maybe 5 months. I've been trying to go through some of the Microsoft Learn capabilities, or rather the learning paths that they have around that, just to get familiar. But I really got serious about it when I put I put my money where my mouth was, and I scheduled the certification exam 2 months out. So it was mid-December, I made the decision to schedule it out for middle of February, or rather early February, and just kind of use that as a way to pressure myself and really ratchet up the prep and training work that I was doing and labs.
Yeah, so that's key, I think, and I've been writing a series of LinkedIn articles about learning because my focus has been on last year. I got the sales and customer service and marketing dynamics certifications, the first Power Platform certification, and all that stuff. frankly, and I'm not bragging, I didn't have to study at all for those because I've been doing it so long that, I could just walk in, maybe a cursory review. But the one I haven't had is field service because I just don't have as much experience with field service. I've dealt with it and worked with it, but I've never taken the certification test on it before. So that was my goal. And my goal with that is just to broaden my reach outside of the normal projects that I work with. So with that one, that was kind of the first one that I really had to study. And like you, I set myself a pretty aggressive goal of actually scheduling the exam. And when you schedule the exam, you put some teeth behind it. Because, I've got people that are on my team or a mentor, and they set a goal that I want to get certified in XYZ, and then they never do it because they don't have a date. You got to have a date.
Yeah. And I'll say I even had, and this is, sharing openly with the world what was going through my head. The night before the exam, I was just panicking of like, I don't know if I'm actually ready. I went in, I was like one click away from canceling the exam that I had for the next day. I didn't, partially because I was like, well, I don't want to pay, $22 to cancel this within the window. It's like 5 business days or something like that.
Right.
I'm like, well, you know what? I've done this much. I've put in the effort. I'm going to go take it even if I don't feel 100% ready. And, came out on the other side feeling pretty glad that I didn't spend the money to defer on something where I was going to pass it anyway.
Right. I think when you take, the more of those exams you take, you kind of recognize patterns. Not that taking more exams makes you more likely to pass another one, but I've developed my own approach to taking a certification exam that helps me be more sure that I'm getting closer to the right answer. It doesn't always get me the right answer, but it gets me closer. And that is, I read the question backwards because the questions generally are set up with a scenario and a question. So the question is last, and sometimes the scenario gives you extra details that you don't really need. So if you read the question, read it backwards, not like read the sentences backwards, but read the bottom section of it to get the question.
Sure.
And then look for the details in the scenario. You can be a lot more focused and not have the extra details throw you off. Like, oh, it's in the mining industry. That doesn't matter. It's just what kind of field should you use for X, and then look at the scenario. And then I look at the answers. And if I'm not really, really, really sure of which one's the right one, I start weeding out the distractors. Because there's always distractors, and those are the ones that aren't right. And if you can weed out the ones that aren't right, then you sometimes have 50-50 chance, and then you can pretty much narrow it down if you have a cursory knowledge of the topic.
Yeah, I have a variation on that approach that I use quite a bit, and I think that definitely that concept of being narrow down the field of possible answers to what's important, and also not getting hung up on a bunch of potentially extraneous information is really important. And that's consistent even on the AI exam that I just took here recently, as well as certainly some of the dynamics ones that I certainly know well, just given my history with the platform. And, those, most of those questions you can get rid of, 2, maybe sometimes 3, and you barely have to read the question of what it's going to be.
And the newer ones have introduced case studies, which is sometimes a lot of text to then get to the questions. And, that can be kind of intimidating. You have, the scenario, the requirements, the details, you got half a dozen different tabs on that thing, then you got a question. Here's one thing I found is on the, and this is for the, Pearson VUE or whatever Microsoft uses for the testing centers, as well as the proctored exams. You can hit Control F to search the text. That's a little tip I found too, where if you have a question about what should the sales managers do, and you go to the scenario, do a Control F to search for sales manager. And if you find it, that usually leads you to the answer or enough detail to get the answer.
Yeah, that's a good one. I was not familiar that you could actually do that. Very cool.
Do you go to the test center or do you do the proctored exam at home?
I am a firm believer in going to the test center. That is the way I like to do it. There's no worry of someone, walking into the room. I don't have to have the anxiety that comes with like shining a camera around to show that I don't have any cheating materials, or anything I'm going to cheat with. And it's just one less thing that I have to deal with. Also, it feels official. I can actually protect that time. I don't have I have to travel to physically get to the test center. So I can tell people, no, I need to be done with this call at 9:00 because my exam starts at 9:30 and I have to physically leave and get there. And I like having that little bit of buffer. How about you?
I am the opposite. I do all my exam as online proctored exams. And a year ago, when they first started doing it, it was kind of rough because, you'd have to like have a webcam to show all around the room. They've changed a little bit now where they text you a little app or a web page on your phone and you just take pictures of what you're facing, what's behind you. I've got to unplug my external monitor and flip it around. But generally that goes very well. I lock my door. I do it from my house so I don't have coworkers walking in if my wife or kids are home. I make them swear that they will not try and get in the room because otherwise I'll fail. And for one thing, I don't know, maybe in Minnesota you've got really nice testing centers. Frankly, the ones around me are all like dumps with computers that are 10 years old with desks that are falling apart. And, I've had technical problems going to my local test center. So I think I trust it more doing it from home. And also I got more flexibility. Like I've actually said, okay, I've got a meeting canceled tomorrow. I'm going to take a certification exam and have the flexibility where if I do a testing center, usually it seems you got to go a week out.
Yeah, I'm definitely scheduling mine more in advance, so that part's not an issue. Pearson is headquartered in Minnesota. We have a million testing centers around here. There's one literally, it's a 10-minute drive from my house. The place I'm going to be moving soon, so the place I'm moving to, there's a testing center 1 mile from the house. I could walk there in under 20 minutes if I really needed to. And they've all of them have been reasonably nice. I mean, it's not crazy, hardware quality of the machines that I'm on, but they've physically worked. The only complaint that I have is I did try to take I took the customer service exam, which I just for whatever reason hadn't taken previously. This was in mid-January, and there was the threat, Joel, of snow in Minnesota. Now, it hadn't actually started snowing yet,
but
they were
every
concerned.
Day in the winter, right?
Right. They were concerned that there was going to be snow later in the day, so they canceled at 8 a.m. all the exams that they had. Now, my exam was scheduled for 9 a.m. I showed up 8:45. They said, sorry, it's been canceled. It's supposed you get, 210 minutes or something like that, ridiculous for that exam. At least I'd never personally take that long just because I've worked with the material so long. So I literally would have been out of there by, even if I took that full time, noon. Not a flake of snow fell from the sky until about 2 p.m. I was very, very frustrated with that. That was the biggest chink in the armor for going to an actual testing center.
Yeah. Well, I guess you have that risk. So,
I'll get off my soapbox now.
Yeah. So I get that. And people like Sean Tabor have this elaborate thing where he goes to the same Starbucks before he takes his exam and feels like if he doesn't do this routine. Myself, I schedule it and just jump in and take it.
Sure.
So
yeah, I don't quite have that rigorous of a series of things I have to go through. I mean, it's not that regimented for success. I have a couple of different test centers I go to. I try to make it there about 15 minutes early. But beyond that, I just, I focus that energy on just knowing the material and having that carry me through.
Right. So the series that I'm writing on LinkedIn has just been a departure from the normal kind of content that I usually write. But it's been kind of an experiment because I got in on a preview of a LinkedIn feature called newsletters.
I like that.
I really like because it's basically articles that are grouped into a series where people can subscribe to the series of articles. And currently I'm limited to just one newsletter, but I can see once this gets released, then that I will probably have newsletters on different topics. And the really cool thing is I have people following the series that don't follow me or aren't connected to me. So it seems to have a little bit more of a life than just writing individual articles or LinkedIn posts. So I really like the format, and I've been kind of comparing I created both like a WordPress blog or a sub site to one of my main blogs and the LinkedIn articles, and by far the LinkedIn newsletter is getting more traction than the blog version. So I really like that new feature of LinkedIn.
Yeah, it's been great. As soon as I saw Joel Lindstrom is starting a newsletter, I said, I'll try that out, see what it's all about. And I've continued reading.
I don't know when they're going to release it as more of a general feature, but I would imagine it's coming soon. But once they do, I think you'll really like it because, again, I think the problem with articles is they've just been kind of one-off things. They have good findability because you can find them through Google and other places, but it seems like that's the missing piece to make articles a little bit more sticky.
Yeah, well, and it really gives you a way, if you have a topic where you have some authority or want to be able to communicate a lot without just doing a novel in a single post, it gives a way to be able to chunk that out and get feedback from people, because managing your own blog and that type of thing, how many people are going and leaving meaningful comments or interacting or sharing there versus if it's within LinkedIn, just doing that. So I think it will be a pretty cool feature. I'll take advantage of it once it is a little more prime time.
So you mentioned you're moving. Where and why are you moving, Matthew?
So I am moving within Minnesota, so I'm not. This is not weather driven. I'll actually only be about a 10-15 minute drive.
You want to get
from
to the
where
warmer side of town?
Yeah, exactly. But so my kids are going to be in school age, coming up in the near future here, and we wanted to try to kind of, if we were going to be somewhere, kind of think through where do we want to be for them to go through all of their schooling, and hopefully, depending on what happens, in other aspects of life, not have to move because of, need to go to a different school or not thinking that far ahead. So we started the search. Oh gosh, it was about 8 months ago at this point that we started casually looking with the timeline of, within the next couple of years, we want to try to move. And, sure enough, we found one that we're really excited about. So, right, good school district that we're excited about there, and a little more space. We like what we have, but this will, as the kids start to get a little bit more space to themselves, it'll give them that space that they need.
Great. Well, I'm going to bring back a feature that we haven't done for a while, which is that's not productive, or is that productive? Whatever we called that feature. So for today's Is That Productive, I'm going to review my Smart Pen. This is something I've been using for over a year. And so I intentionally wanted to live with it for a while before I reviewed it. So we talked about Evernote and OneNote. We talked about physically writing your journal versus electronic notes. The idea of a smart pen is the merging of the two, a physical pen that can easily be transitioned into digital notes. So the pen that I started with is the Neo Smart Pen N2, which is a pen that uses a specially coated paper. You can buy notebooks. You can buy the Moleskine notebooks, the ones that look a little bulbous, that stick out. The paper sticks a little bit out. Work with them, and the idea is you take notes like you would normally take notes, but you can sync those notes to your phone, to your computer, to your iPad, to almost any device. You can only do it to one device, so that's something you think about which device you want to sync to. And it'll OCR them. You can sync directly to OneNote or Evernote. And it's something that I found pretty indispensable. And I say my original pen because I broke my original pen. I somehow damaged the sensor. I think I pushed the pen part too far in or something. And so I had to replace it because I actually got it in 2018. It was out of warranty. So there's also the Moleskine version, which is the Pen Plus, which is basically the Smart Pen N2 branded Moleskine. They're shaped a little bit differently. So the N2 is more rounded, where the Moleskine is kind of flatter. They have the same technology in them, but I find the Moleskine version a little bit more feels better to hold in some ways, but either one are not bad. And I have terrible handwriting, and so one of my goals has been over the last year and a half, 2 years, to improve my handwriting, and I've been successful with that. But it successfully transitions that. So I'll give you, for instance, I was in a meeting where we were doing discovery and then transitioning the notes into user stories, into DevOps, and so I intentionally just wrote in my Moleskine Pen Plus notebook the stories, and then I was able to very quickly sync that, take the text transition, wordsmith it, and then copy and paste it into stories, and it went very quickly. So I find it extremely effective. Not every note I want to keep, but it's kind of per page I can choose what I want to sync. There's a little checkbox. If you want to email the notes to somebody, you can check it, and if you have it syncing with the app, it will email it to it. And what I find, again, just very useful about it is I can go into a meeting, don't have to fire up my laptop. I can just be writing in my notebook, but it saves me a ton of time then transitioning that into OneNote or sharing the notes with other people or taking a OCR of the notes to do that. There's other things like the Rocket Notebook where you use a regular notebook and then it's specially designed paper to scan it with the phone. I find that the Smart Pen is better. And there's other Smart Pens, like I think there's one called the Live Scribe or something. I haven't tried those, but as far as the N2 or the Moleskine Pen Plus, which is basically the N2, I would highly say is productive and saves me a ton of time.
All right. Well, that's cool. I don't know. I mean, I still like my pen and paper for both journaling and for kind of planning, and I'll call it more limited note taking. And my go-to is still the Office Lens app to be able to pull that in, push directly into either into a OneNote notebook, and I can choose from either my work or my personal OneNote, or drop it into PDF it, any of those kind of things. So that's still my go-to. I haven't graduated to trying that digital pen,
right?
Or the smart pen, rather.
Right. Well, I think too, as far as it stores when it syncs, I don't know what it's doing, but if I have a red notebook and a black notebook, and if I write in the red notebook and I write in the black notebook, it has a digital representation of those notebooks, so it knows which notebook that I'm writing it in. So I don't have to deal with each page necessarily. I can just sync the pen, and if I've actually got 3 or 4 different notebooks. One I use for more of a journal, one I use for just personal to-do type things, one I use for meeting notes, and it keeps them separate. So just again, you could do the same thing with Office Lens or whatever. So I'm not saying you have to. I'm just saying for me, It's very productive.
Yeah, the pen and multi-notebook combo.
Exactly. So kind of related to that, have you tried the collection feature in the Chromium Edge Dev?
So I have not tried that yet, no.
Okay. So I did write about that in one of my articles on my learning series as something I find is a very useful learning tool. Specifically, you can just have multiple collections. You can drag and drop text and images. It's basically like the clip to OneNote, but having it in the browser and being able to build the collection, which then you can send the whole collection to OneNote or whatever you want to. I found that especially for learning, because you go through Microsoft Learn or whatever, learn content, and you just grab these snippets, put it in there, arrange it the way you want to, and then copy that to a OneNote. And it can be from different pages. And, versus sending each snippet to OneNote, it's kind of easier to arrange it the way you want and build the collection, then send it somewhere.
Sure. Now, as you're using that, are you finding that you get stuff that's like partially done in transition sitting in that collection? And how do you not have orphaned content that sits out in those collections?
I'm not, as far as orphan content, for example, when I'm studying for my field service exam, I have a collection for resource scheduling. So as I go through the multiple articles about resource scheduling, I'm grabbing sections or lists such as these are the statuses of work items, because I know that's probably going to be on the exam. So I then drag that over to the collection. And then there's a diagram of, the stages of scheduling, and I'll drag that over. And so then you can kind of rearrange those pieces, drag them up, drag them down, delete them, whatever, and get that. Because then what I build that to is kind of a study sheet that has all that detail on it.
Got it. Okay.
And then it's live, so if you have part of a website on there, you can click on it to go directly to that page and that section of the page right in the browser.
Yep. Yeah, and I do like that concept, though I feel, maybe I would have to try it, but I would still be worried that it would be I'd be trying to think back to where is it that I have that content stored. And I won't necessarily remember it was part of, my learning that I was doing there. I'll try to go search OneNote. It's not there. That's one where I think I'd have to get hands-on to figure out what the actual workflow would look like for me. Not that not a judgment, good or bad. Just I can't see how that's going to land, or I've maybe tried too many of those things where, this is going to be great, but it turns out it's just one more place to have to go look for something later.
I don't think I'd make it my permanent home for it, though. That's not what I did. I did it when I'm in a session learning things and collecting pieces about them, but I then moved it to OneNote.
Yeah,
so
and that's
I'm using more of a staging area, but also I was researching mattresses, for example, and going to different pages that had different models and had different, consumer reports and then things like that. Besides learning, I found it very helpful when compiling research amongst different pages for maybe something you're going to purchase, because a way to collect all that information, arrange it the way you want. And then if, maybe you're not keeping it permanently, it might just be for that specific focused time, then delete the collection. But as far as I think if I was to keep it like, I need to keep this in perpetuity and come back and be able to find it a year from now, I would agree with you. I wouldn't keep it there permanently.
Yeah. So it's important then to have that habit of actually moving it somewhere if you want to be able to get it later. Otherwise, you have that challenge of one more place of content. So either stick a fork in it because it's done, or move it forward to a more permanent repository.
And I would say, the thing about me and taking notes, they're not so much for perpetuity. I have very few notebooks that I need to keep for long term. most things that are online content, the online content changes so frequently that it would be, I don't see the point in storing a version of what it was 6 months ago. There are things for personal purposes, when people's birthdays and things like that. But as far as I don't have a lot of detail, my workflow is more, if I take notes, I remember it. And if I need to remember it, otherwise I can go back and find the new copy, unless it's like part of a conversation or some artifact I create specific to me.
Sure. I guess, the thing that immediately comes to mind for me there is how many things I do. And it might just be the nature of like my role and some of the conversations I end up having. But I have to try to put these kind of recreations together of different things at different points in time. Being part of Microsoft and kind of the ever shifting definition of some different licenses, and what was included in which license at what point in time, and having very clear, definition and documentation of that as things, new capabilities are added and, packaging evolves and that sort of thing. I find that, even though it was something from, say, 6 months ago, that was important, because that was what somebody transacted on. And even if we take the licensing piece out of it, specifically, but like feature and capability of why was this the capability you were talking about? Why were you not talking about this other thing? Having a way to be able to reconstruct some of that history of when did that feature actually get introduced? When did I go do that research on it and bring that together? That's something where I do want to store some of that stuff in, perpetuity is, maybe an overstatement, but certainly for longer than like, until it's not immediately relevant anymore.
Yeah, I'll give you that. And I probably have some of that, although I have a weird knack for remembering some of that stuff. So like, I can remember, you asked me what was introduced to CRM 2015, I can probably tell you.
I'll tip my cap to you, but the other thing is people always want to have some sort of written definition of it rather than just like, oh, Matt happened to remember.
I'll give you that. So yeah, that's a good point. But I think my use of OneNote is more for limited time purposes, unless it's something important. So like have a big trip we're taking as the family this summer. And so I'm collecting information and details and timelines and checklists of when we need to do things for that. Like just took the kids to get their passports. And, the kids said, Dad, can't you just go do that yourself? Why do we have to go and do that? So then I explained to them why they had to do it and get all the details together. So that's where, but I have very few notes, notebooks, OneNotes, except for maybe journals that I keep more than 6 months. I have YubiKey set up as much as I can, and I like it. And I've got all my Google accounts, my personal Microsoft accounts, my Dropbox, my Twitter. I guess the main thing that using a YubiKey makes you wish is that more services supported YubiKey.
Yeah, I'll give a big and one on top of that. Agreed.
Because it seems like they keep promising additional services, but I had looked at it a year ago, and then I started using it. I've actually got 2 YubiKeys now because different devices, different things work with it. And it doesn't seem like they're making much progress with getting a little services. I mean, my password, 1Password works with it, which I guess LastPass does too. And, Google, so any of the Google stuff it works with. But other than that, it seems really fairly limited.
Yeah, well, and I will wholeheartedly agree there. I use it as kind of the most secure level of security that I'm physically putting in place for myself. So having it on top of my LastPass account, since that is like the key to getting into so many other of my accounts. Like that's a really core one for me.
Yeah.
Same thing with my Google account. I have that as my gateway into so many other things that's really important for me. And there are a lot of services where if I look at the threat modeling that I do on it, it's not the biggest deal that it doesn't support that level of two-factor auth. I would certainly prefer the use of a hardware key like the YubiKey, but if I have a really strong password and some form of two-factor authentication, that's better than nothing. And for a lot of services, it's just, even if I lost access to the account, as much as I don't want to have my Twitter account compromised, if it was, it's, I'm just not enough of a prolific voice on Twitter for that to be a real thing for me.
Yeah, and I've got 5 Twitter accounts, so it depends on which one they really want to get into.
Yeah, well, and I suffer from the same affliction. I have like 6, including demo ones, my main one, my connecting the data one, and several others that I have to be able to log into other services with Twitter, but not have it tied back to me.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, and I got it set up with my 1Password. Is there also their support for, since I use different devices, I use some like Android and some iOS apps. Their support for iOS is extremely limited. It's like only 1Password works with it on iOS. So that seems like a big gap too for a lot of users.
So Joel, one thing, as we come back around that I meant to bring up before when we were talking about the kind of the learning topics and that kind of thing. Have you seen the Microsoft certifications? It's almost like a giant poster across the different, business applications, modern workplace, data and AI, that kind of shows through what all the different exams are, how those tie to certifications, and kind of which ones build on top of each other.
Yeah, I've seen something like that. I don't know if I've seen the most recent one.
Yeah, so I've found this, and I only found this really recently, but I would just like to put it out there. We talk a lot on the show around different ways and continuing to improve yourself, and you've got your LinkedIn Learning series. This is a tool where if you're trying to answer that question of, what should I go take or what should I go study for, this might offer some ideas for folks. And so I just, if we can post it to the show notes, the link to that certification poster. I find it to be a pretty worthwhile one, and it's live content, so it's not just a static thing that's going to get stale over time. There's a nice aka.ms link for it that we can get in the chat.
Yeah, send that to me.
That we can get in the show notes.
Send that to me. That would be great, because again, people go through, like in our circle, people go through the Dynamics ones. Now there's the Power Platform, like the MB400, MB600. But knowing where you go beyond that, like I know there's Teams certification and Azure certifications. So that would be. It's been great to catch up with you. I think it's been a very productive episode as normal. So stay productive.
Yeah, sounds good. It'll be productively moving and trying to get my head screwed back on straight. So
when's the big move?
It's coming up a week from today.
All right. Well, I would offer to help carry boxes, but I'm not in your neighborhood.
Fair enough. Well,
and I don't have a
you can
truck.
help me unpack some other time.